Hello everybody, welcome back to the New Precept Media's live broadcast with me, Robert Wallace. I am going to do a brief overview today of this concept that I call going interdimench. Going interdimench refers to a state of mind that can be attained through concentration in a still, silent way. If you have been a spiritual seeker for a while, or maybe you've never began the journey, well, you have begun if you're at least watching this then, because this would be the beginning. But then you probably are aware of the need to disidentify with what is termed the ego and what is termed the mind. You are probably aware of a concept of higher dimensional realities where angelic beings or spirits, deceased loved ones, souls, and entities, and things of this nature exist. That is different from this world, this reality of physical, corporeal, embodied existence. That right off the bat is pretty well known. But how to get into the state of mind where we can begin to perceive it is not so well known at all. Unfortunately, it is probably the least known thing about this journey, and yet it is the most important, because this is how you actually have the practical experience of seeing things that you can only truly see in order to comprehend, in one sense. Part of the journey, however, is learning what this other dimension consists of before you get into that state to some degree, and then practicing meditation, specifically in the calming of the mind. But in your meditation practice, you're striving for this state ultimately. If you don't know how to get to the state, though, you could be sitting and looking at the back of your eyelids for 20, 40 years, your entire life. There's really no need for that. In my studies and in my searching, I've been a member of various different religions, various different churches, various Christian denominations, the Church of Scientology. I've studied different aspects of esotericism and the occult. People like Rudolf Steiner, Emanuel Swedenborg, 17th century Christian mystic, and Jewish mysticism. Probably most of the things that you as an interdimensional cosmonaut want to be, if you're not already, are searching high and low through in order to find the answer to the mystical questions of life, and specifically to get yourself initiated into these higher realities. I can give you some information that should prove helpful and get you definitely on the right track. And I say definitely, but it really does come down to your readiness. It comes down to your desire, and ultimately it comes down to God's timing. Okay? There are techniques that can be done, but before we address those techniques, let me just preface this a little bit more. If you are seeking interdimensional conscious awareness for really anything other than as a pursuit or a part of your pursuit of the kingdom of heaven, this is not gonna fare well, bode well for you ultimately. It's not going to help you, and you're not going to get as far. As a matter of fact, without a understanding of this information by people who have gone into these dimensions, you're not going to be able to understand what you're seeing. You're going to see really crazy things. And I say crazy things in the sense that there's not a lot of physically manifested beings or entities that we can just compare what you'll see to, which is what makes this whole domain or realm so occult or hidden. Okay. And by the way, when I use the term occult, as a Christian mystic, I do not mean by any means black magic or white magic for that matter. We're simply talking about, the word itself just means hidden. Though there are people who practice those things, and they are taking things from the hidden path or the hidden dimension in order to work their magics. Those things ultimately will end in destruction for the practitioners. They will not attain the kingdom of heaven because they've missed the point. Along the path, though, to the kingdom of heaven, there are a lot of events that will occur to you spiritually and interdimensionally, things that you'll see in rites of passage that are part of that glorious path to the kingdom of heaven. That along the way, though, people, esotericists, witches, others, have gone off and taken off appendages of this path and made a whole thing around it. You know, the way the mind works in certain ways, they will turn into a magical mindedness. The way sight works, or the way that the different faculties work and the cause and effect of certain processes, they'll take advantage of that, and then they'll create these chicaneries around it. It's very important, though, that you realize that if you pursue the kingdom of heaven, all of these mystical things that have attracted you for so long will become part of your journey. But if you go seeking those things individually, you're not going to get to the big goal. So aim for the big goal and everything will follow. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things will be added unto you. Okay? So I just want to preface it by saying that. That's very important. Is this, now, you might call the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God. You might be looking for a state of nirvana. We might have different words in terms of nomenclature. These stories and these religions and these cults and these different rites of passage are all just they're pathways to get you to have a key realization ultimately. And I'm still on that path, but even as you start that path, very interesting phenomena begins to occur. And what I found is that we really can't truly break through to the other side and start to cultivate ourselves as far as digesting the experiences and thinking more deeply with them until we have an understanding of how to detach from the mind, and then things start up in our vision. Another key thing I'll say is that when it comes to purity, when it comes to seeking first God's kingdom and his righteousness, it is very important that you take very seriously on your journey the ideas of charity, compassion, love, understanding, temperance, patience, all of the virtues, because these concepts aren't there merely to make good little people. It's the language of the universe. It's the constitution of the spiritual world. It's the very nature of the place you're trying to go. And if you try to get into that dimension without having spent much time cultivating these qualities, then when you get there, you're going to find that your interior self starts to act out on its own. And what I mean by that is there's a buffer when you're here in the physical world where I think a bad thought, but then I tell myself don't say that thought, and then I say the opposite. Over in the spiritual world, if your heart isn't in the right place because you've lived a life of judgment or whatever, then you're immediately going to start acting out of that space, and it gets pretty ugly pretty quick. And it can be a very terrible scenario. Which is why the traditions have hid the means and the ways to these dimensions. Because it truly is for one's own good that they should truly prioritize the kingdom of heaven and God's righteousness as part of their search. If you don't do that, then it does turn into a form of witchcraft. And so this is really the big difference, I think. The different religions are teaching you using different stories. Your Christ figure has a consistent identity through all these stories, and the saviors and your enemies or your adversaries have their consistent theme in the real life inner drama that every human being is basically going through in one level or another. So what that means is that you will have your trials and temptations, and you will have your periods of wilderness and privation. You're going to have moments of awakening, and ultimately there will be the proverbial death, burial, and resurrection. And this is speaking of your actual your lower self being transmuted into the Christ consciousness, your soul aligning with the Christ, which opens you up into these higher dimensions. All right, well, let's get to the juicy stuff. And that is, how can I shift my awareness, my visual awareness, so that I perceive the spiritual beings and start to become aware of the spiritual entities around me, for instance. I should say that your goal should not be to see these entities, but that incidental of the practice, they, amongst, as well as other things, to become visible. And things will progress as your strength, as your visual strength, and all of these and skills, and things will get deeper and deeper. But right off the bat, let me try to explain something to you. If you think of the moon emits a glow, whereas the sun emits a light. And in either way, they're lights. One's a light, one's a lesser light, if you will. But within the rays of the glow of the moon is a certain kind of soft luminescence that sort of ambiently lights the ambient space around one. And it's kind of in this area of the moonlight itself, we're looking through that lens that we start to see the other dimension, which lives within that moonlit sort of environment, if you will. Now, the other spiritual worlds, of course, run concurrent with this one, this physical world. They permeate this dimension, of course, so we have spirits walking through our walls and standing right here and all around us and all of this sort of thing all the time. And so when we start to concentrate our sight in a certain way, we're going to start to see into a plane where they're at. Okay. So let me take an example. I'm going to kind of mesh together some details, some examples from a Rudolf Steiner meditation that was very effective for me. And I learned that in one of his books called How to Know Higher Worlds. Now, I've been studying, and I still every day I spend all my time studying Rudolf Steiner in particular, because is such an accomplished anthroposophist. This is his term for a form of theosophy, which is really rooted in the correct motivation of seeking the kingdom of heaven. And it is, and so the lessons are explained in one way, and then I had my own kind of melding experience where I combined them in a different way, and then attained the end phenomena, the objective. It involves looking at a plant, and there are many different meditation types, and I recommend you pursue those meditation types or incorporate them with your meditative practices if you want to have the breakthrough that you probably, are dying for. I have a plant here, of course. Unfortunately, this plant has died. Beautiful roses. And so the way it's explained is this, that growing plants emit something akin to light from the sun, or they should arouse a feeling in us that we feel while watching the sunrise. Okay, I know that may confuse you a little bit. While looking at dying things, or things that are diminishing and passing away, a corpse of any kind should arouse or connect with us the feeling that we get while watching the rising of the moon. There are a lot of details to these meditations. I'm just going to give you the quick cliff notes here. So perhaps if you do them exactly right now after you watch this video, you can have that initial breakthrough. And this will be a massive game changer for you. This will make religion so real for you. It will make spirituality completely real for you. And that's exciting. So what you want to do in this version that I'm going to give you, so you want to stare at a plant. You want to empty your mind. Now, of course, I'll have to deal with this at another time too, because it's real. Everybody's trying to empty their mind. That's the whole point of meditation. If it was as easy as saying empty your mind, people would have been interdimensional a long time ago. But in the process of staring at this plant, we basically are trying to zone out on it. When you're sitting there and you're kind of just like staring empty-mindedly at something? One of the key things you want to bear in mind, though, because zoning out isn't exactly correct either, because there has to be an intent here. But we want to keep our thoughts. If we have any thoughts, they need to be about the thing that we're looking at. They need to be about its nature, about where it's been, how it feels, what it must be like to be it, what its creation process was like. We must imagine it's growing, and and whatever we can think, in terms of the leaves and the details of the leaves and how this and that and these things, just pertaining to that. Keep our attention on this. And in the process of going through this, our vision will start to change. It will literally start to shift. I know what you're saying. I look at flowers all the time. I work at a floral shop. I don't go interdimensional. Well, because there is specific things that have to be accomplished during this meditation, and they don't happen by mistake, generally. And so, and it may take a little practice. It definitely should take some further investigation. You never stop learning. But this is what you're looking at. We're staring at the plant. We're stilling our mind. We're not going to entertain or run off with any of the thoughts that we're having. Also, let me say this. This is a very hopeful thing that everybody needs to hear. That once you accomplish this kind of crossing over, this breakthrough, just the first time, from then on, it will become much easier, in one sense, to continue to get back into that state. Because you'll remember being in that state. You'll remember exactly the stillness of the body, the stillness of the mind, how you had everything set up internally when that started happening. And then simply by looking at a plant and remembering that last interdimensional experience and putting your mind back into that state of mind, you're actually going to, it's like a record. It's like a preset memory button. Boop, you go right back into it. So be of good cheer. On the other hand, it will be more difficult because every time you do this, you're going deeper within yourself, in a sense. It's going to take a little bit more out of you. It's going to require a deeper sense of stillness and more concentration. So it is kind of like an exercise at the same time. So I'll just say that. So we're staring at the plant. We're relaxing our vision. We're thinking only, if anything, of the plant. We're visualizing or keeping our attention around the object itself, around the plant itself. And we're resting our eyes on that. Now, when you're sitting here staring at the plant, a couple things are going to occur to you. There's going to be thoughts like, am I doing it right? How do I know when I'm there? How long is this going to take? When I had my first breakthrough doing this exercise, I was sitting at a desk and looking at a plant at work. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do this meditation, and I'm not going to get up until it's done correctly. I'm not going to get up. I'm not going to go home. I'm not going to go have dinner. I'm not going to come in the morning because I'm not getting up. I'm going to sit here until I get this. There's a breakthrough that has to happen, and I'm so tired of procrastinating and waiting to find out how and when it's going to happen. I'm going to do it. I suggest you get either sick and tired of not having the experience so that you are ready for it, so that you're demanding it internally, or you've just committed yourself to the concept that I'm going to sit here. Maybe you're a more patient person, and that isn't going to be a barrier for you. I was able to get through within 5 minutes. Maybe it was less. There's just a few mental hurdles, some mental gymnastics as far as rebuking your old mental chatter or your tendencies to become distracted. So, but again, we'll go over this at another time. So we're resting our eyes on it, and as we do, we notice that the environment around the plant softens up, like one of those pictures you'll take where the background becomes more soft. And we'll notice that let's add another step to this now. Remember, we were talking about the moonlight. And what I realize is that, well, it's hard for me to remember the feeling of what the moonlight looks like to me, the feeling I get when I see the moon rising. So I said, what if I just imagine the moon over, this is a big key to this shortcut. I imagine the moon over the plant or a side of it, so that while I'm seeing this mental image that I've projected of the moon, it's literally causing or re-stimulating the sensation that I would see when seeing the moon rise. And I found this works somewhat whether I'm using the moon rise or just the moon, but for the sake of, let's just picture a horizon with the moon coming over it. And while we're staring at the plant, we also see the moon rise. And that causes our eyes to soften, as if the moon was casting its light into our environment. And that actually begins to shift what we're seeing. It begins to transform what we're seeing. The environment becomes dark around the plant, almost as if a pall, like a cloud, if you will. It's not really a cloud as in like this, but it's more of like a 2D overlay has been placed around the plant. if you are familiar with like Photoshop or something, you know, like a masking, if you were to mask it, and then the aura is going to become very visible. So if you had never seen an aura before, or this is you're gonna have to go right through that process to get there. So that's kind of cool. You'll find that the plant has what it seems to be a glow, but on the other hand, it seems to be just the actual lighting as it was, less all the environmental lighting. So then it appears to be glowing by contrast, but it actually is growing, and you're going to start to see. What should then or soon after begin to happen is you'll start to see the appearance of the plant almost as if it's beginning to grow up and maybe float around. And it appears as though it's literally flying or moving around. And then, of course, now during this process, many times you'll probably shake your eyes and reset your eyes because you get uncomfortable. You might get a little scared at what you're seeing or whatever. So you'll have to get back in there and say, I'm going to go in there. I'm going to hold my stillness, hold my silence, hold my attention longer and deeper. And that's part of this process. And then in that process, you're going to see this light. Now, by light, of course, I'm going back to that whole aura thing. It's going to seem as if the plant is glowing. Okay, this is imperfect language, but you'll understand once it starts to happen. And in that glow that surrounds the plant, you'll begin to notice, if you hold it, and this may take a couple attempts. You may have a breakthrough where you have the environment shift and become dark around it. You may see the plant move, and that's a great first day. Put it away, go do something. You did something great. But the next time you come back to it, maybe later that night, you go to your bedroom, you put a plant or a flower in there, and this works with all plants. I've had a lot of success with the flowers themselves, as opposed to leaves or leafy plants. So that's up to you, but I would recommend doing something with a flower on it, because that becomes the brightest part. And if you can hold your mind still, or again, only think thoughts just relating to its interests, it's what it is interesting for it, what pertains directly to it, then you'll go deeper. And that light becomes bright even unto a flame. Okay? So your environment's dark, this is glowing, and now that glowingness which surrounds the plant actually now begins to culminate into a more opaque light, like light. Okay? The light becomes more opaque. At this point, you're not really going to be seeing or paying attention much to anything in your environment. The deeper you go, the more invisible it will appear. The brighter this light becomes, and the more it's what you see. Now, when you're holding and you're saying your eyes might start watering, they might be just because you're, holding. You ever had a staring contest? Just try not to blink. And at some point, you're you want to keep your breath going, but if you do bait your breath in order to maintain stillness and keep your eyes still, because it requires that level of concentration, your eyes may water. Okay, and this is a growing process, so it gets easier. It happens less and less as you go. And then that flame will ultimately transform, or rather transfer you into another space. And before I'm not going to discuss right now what can be seen or what will be seen once you enter into the spirit of the plant, because that's what you would have just done. And the phenomena is so incredible, I had no idea what to expect, because I had not gotten that far. And so when I saw what I saw in the orchid, I did this with an orchid, I was very astounded to find the plant spirit. And confronting the plant spirit and seeing what he looked like, and the clarity and the light and in this dimension I was in, it was very intense. Now, the point here, this is a meditation which can allow you to ultimately, this will get you into that state of mind that you need to be in to start to see it environmentally. Whether or not you see the plant spirit or not is a different story. That's beside the point right now. The next thing, once you've accomplished that, and maybe you can do that in the next 5 minutes, and maybe you can do it in the next week, you can get yourself around to doing it, and this is what I did. I'm just going to tell you what I did. I decided, well, if this is emitting a light, okay, and it's a lot easier because it's the way this meditation is working with the moonlight, it actually creates darkness over the light because things are inverse in the spiritual world. So I realized, okay, it's emitting its own auric light. I see that. This is very real. So it should work in the dark because it's got its own light. So I did the same meditation on a plant in a dark room before bed. Turn off the lights, I was going to sleep, and I decided just to sit up and stare at the plant and do the same meditation. Wow, was that ever a massive breakthrough? Because indeed, not only was there something to see by directing my vision over toward where that plant was, even if it's lit up a little bit or completely dark, I started to see other things. And these other things are very well documented and described in Rudolf Steiner's books and maybe other people's books that I haven't gotten to yet. And one of the things you'll notice is like a purple cloud. It's like a luminescent purple cloud that hovers over all plants. It's sparkly, and it has, once you get into seeing it, it has kind of this flippity-floppity nature that's really hard to explain. It's very shifty, and it's very much real and alive, and it hovers over the plant. And I'm thinking of other spiritual things that you're going to begin seeing, but I don't want to overwhelm one video here. So anyway, and once you can see that, now you're going to start practicing on your own. You're just going to be like, this is crazy. I can't believe this is happening to me. What would happen if I direct my vision over here or at this, this object over here? And what's going to start happening is you're going to become aware of other beings which use that same spectrum of light that you've now gained the ability to see, in which to live, in which they're veiled, their manifestation is veiled. So then now you're going to look on any given night without even thinking, and you're going to start to see spiritual beings walking around, spiritual beings that have no physical form or no form that you can associate with anything you've seen that is physical. And you'll also see other things, creatures and other things on the floor. You'll see that your entire environment is permeated by this almost electric, neon-looking world of beings. Again, once you have that initial breakthrough, once you've gotten through the process, you've seen the aura, the environment has darkened, maybe once you've used really the moonlight as kind of transfer that into other things, and you've opened up another world, and you've just begun. So I'm going to end this video, but I am going to be back. We're going to talk more about emptying the mind. We're going to talk more about all these sorts of details. Please leave messages in the comments area, specifics that you're interested in. Otherwise, I'm going to auto-generate information that you may or may not care about. So thanks again. Have a great day.